The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the small house, casting pale light across the worn furniture. Ryan Holt stirred on the couch, his neck stiff from another night of uncomfortable sleep. A sound from the kitchen pulled him awake. He turned his head and froze completely. Standing in his kitchen was a woman wearing his white dress shirt, pouring coffee like she belonged there. When she turned and caught his stare, her lips curved into a knowing smile. "You really don't remember last night, do you?" From the hallway, Lily peeked out, giggling. The woman's gaze shifted back to Ryan. "We need to talk, Ryan." Ryan Holt was 36 years old, and he had learned long ago that life didn't hand out second chances just because you deserved them. He had been an engineer, once the kind of man who wore ties to work and had health insurance and a retirement plan that made sense on paper. That version of him felt like a stranger, now a ghost from a life that had collapsed slowly and then all at once. His wife had left when Lily was 3, walked out without much explanation beyond a note that said she couldn't do it anymore. He never heard from her again. No calls, no birthday cards, nothing. So Ryan became both parents, which meant he also became someone who couldn't afford to keep his old job. The hours were too long, the daycare too expensive, the balance impossible. He quit, told himself it was temporary, and started taking freelance work, fixing whatever people needed fixed. Leaky pipes, faulty wiring, broken appliances that probably should have been replaced years ago. The work was inconsistent and the pay was worse, but it was flexible, and flexibility was the only currency that mattered when you were raising a kid alone. Their house was small, a rental on the edge of a neighborhood that developers had forgotten about. The paint was peeling in places, and the heater made a rattling sound on cold nights, but it was theirs in the way that mattered. Ryan kept it clean. He made sure Lily had a bedroom that felt safe, even if the furniture came from thrift stores, and the walls were decorated with drawings she had taped up herself. He cooked dinner every night, even when he was too tired to stand, because sitting down together at the table was one of the few routines he could still control. Lily never complained. She was 7 years old and already understood more about the world than most kids her age. She knew they didn't have much money. She knew her dad worked hard. She knew that some of her classmates had things she would never have. But she also knew that her father loved her with a fierceness that didn't need words, and that was enough. Ryan had taught her something early on, a phrase he repeated whenever things got tough. "We may be broke, Lily," he would say, kneeling down to meet her eyes, "but we don't break." She always nodded, solemn and serious, like she was taking an oath. Ryan lived by a code that didn't make much sense to most people. He believed in kindness even when it wasn't convenient. He believed in helping people even when they couldn't pay him back. He believed that dignity wasn't something you lost just because your bank account was empty. It made him a strange fit in a world that measured worth in dollars, but he didn't care. He had watched too many people sacrifice their principles for comfort, and he refused to be one of them. So he worked his odd jobs, fixed what needed fixing, and came home to his daughter every night. They played card games at the kitchen table. They watched old movies on a television that only got 3 channels. They read books from the library until Lily fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was a good life. It was an honest life. And on most days, that was enough. The night it happened, the storm had been building for hours. Rain came down in sheets so thick that the windshield wipers could barely keep up. And the streets were flooding, fast water pooling in the low spots and then turning intersections into rivers. Ryan was driving home from a job across town, his toolbox rattling in the back seat, his hands tight on the wheel. The radio crackled with warnings about downed power lines and road closures, but he knew these streets well enough to navigate them blind. He was tired, the kind of tired that settled into your bones and made every movement feel heavy, but he was almost home. Just a few more miles. That was when he saw the car. It was a luxury sedan, black and sleek and completely out of place in this part of town. It had skidded off the road and slammed into a tree, the front end crumpled like paper. Smoke was rising from the hood, thin and gray and growing thicker by the second. Ryan didn't think. He pulled over, threw the truck into park, and ran. The rain soaked through his jacket in seconds, cold and brutal, but he didn't feel it. All he saw was the woman in the driver's seat, slumped forward against the steering wheel, her face pale and streaked with blood. He tried the door, locked. He shouted, pounding on the window, but she didn't move. The smoke was getting worse. He could smell it now, acrid and chemical, the kind of smell that meant fire was coming. He grabbed a wrench from his toolbox, smashed the window, and reached inside. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open, unfocused and frightened. "Help," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Please." Her seatbelt was jammed, the mechanism bent from the impact. Ryan pulled out his utility knife and sawed through the strap, his hands shaking from adrenaline. The smoke was thicker now, pouring into the cabin, and he could feel the heat building under the hood. He hooked his arms under hers and pulled, dragging her through the broken window, just as the first flames licked up from the engine. She collapsed against him, her weight suddenly too much, and he half carried, half dragged her away from the car. 20 feet. 30. They were barely clear when the gas tank ignited the explosion, throwing heat and light across the flooded street. Ryan fell to his knees, the woman still in his arms, both of them gasping for air. She was shaking, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. "I can't breathe," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't." He held her tighter, his own heart pounding so hard it hurt. "You're okay," he said, even though he didn't know if that was true. "You're okay now." The nearest hospital was 15 miles away, and the roads were getting worse by the minute. Ryan looked at the woman, her eyes glassy with shock, her breathing shallow and uneven, and made a decision. He couldn't wait for an ambulance. He couldn't risk the drive. He loaded her into his truck carefully, like she might break, and turned toward home. She drifted in and out of consciousness the whole way, her head lolling against the window, her lips moving soundlessly. When they finally pulled into the driveway, the rain was still coming down, relentless and cold. Ryan carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him, and laid her on his bed. It was the only place that made sense. He pulled the blanket over her, checked her pulse, her breathing. She was stable, he thought. Hoped. He didn't know what else to do. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her like a second skin, and Ryan knew she needed to get out of them before hypothermia set in. He worked quickly, methodically, trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. He found a towel, dried her arms, her face. He draped a spare shirt over her, something oversized and soft, and hung her wet suit jacket over the back of a chair to dry. When he was done, he stepped back, his own clothes dripping onto the floor, and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. She looked small in his bed, vulnerable in a way that didn't match the expensive watch on her wrist or the designer labels on her clothes. He grabbed a pillow and a blanket and headed for the couch. Sleep didn't come easy, but eventually exhaustion won. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Ryan woke to the sound of small footsteps. Lily stood in the doorway of the living room, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her eyes wide and worried. "Daddy," she whispered. "Who's that lady?" Ryan sat up, rubbing his face. "Someone who needed help, sweetheart." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "Is she okay?" "I think so." "Why is she in your bed?" "Because it was the safest place for her." Lily nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense. "Are you going to sleep on the couch forever?" Ryan smiled despite himself. "Just for tonight." A flash of lightning lit up the room, bright and brief, and for a moment he could see the woman clearly through the open bedroom door. Even unconscious, even battered and bruised, there was something about her that commanded attention. Something powerful. Something that made Ryan uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "She's pretty. Go back to bed, Lil." "Okay." She patted back down the hall, and Ryan lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the house was quiet except for the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. He thought about the woman in his bed, about the way she had looked at him in those brief moments of consciousness, like she was trying to memorize his face. He thought about the expensive car, the designer clothes, the diamond earrings he had carefully placed on his nightstand. Whoever she was, she came from a world he didn't understand, a world of money and power and influence, a world where people didn't end up on the side of flooded roads in neighborhoods like his. He told himself it didn't matter. He had done what anyone would do. When morning came, she would leave, go back to wherever she belonged, and that would be the end of it. He was sure of it. But as he drifted back to sleep, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that nothing was ever that simple. Morning came slow and gray, the sky still heavy with clouds. Ryan made coffee in the kitchen, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Lily. He glanced at the suit jacket draped over the chair, the fabric expensive and perfectly tailored, and felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Whoever this woman was, she didn't belong here. He heard movement from the bedroom, the creak of floorboards, and turned. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the pale morning light, wearing his white dress shirt. It hung loose on her frame, the hem falling to mid-thigh, the collar open at her throat. Her hair was tousled, falling in waves around her face, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But she held herself like royalty, shoulders back, chin up, unbothered by the fact that she was in a stranger's house wearing a stranger's clothes. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and measured. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Lily appeared in the hallway, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Who are you?" The woman looked down at her, and for the first time something softened in her expression. She crouched, bringing herself to Lily's level. "Just someone your dad saved." Lily studied her for a long moment, then looked at Ryan. "Daddy saves people a lot." "Does he?" The woman's gaze shifted back to Ryan, and there was something new in her eyes now, something that looked almost like respect. Ryan cleared his throat. "I can call you a car or an Uber. Whatever you need, Thud." The woman straightened, smoothing the shirt down absently. "That won't be necessary. My driver's outside. He's been waiting since 6. Ryan blinked. "Your driver?" "Yes." She walked past him into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of coffee, like she had done it 100 times before, and took a slow sip. "Thank you for the hospitality, Mr. Holt." He hadn't told her his name. She must have seen the question on his face because she smiled just a little. "Your mail was on the counter." Ryan glanced at the stack of bills and notices his name printed across the top of each one and felt heat rise to his cheeks. The woman set the mug down and crossed her arms, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. "You pulled me out of a burning car," she said. "You brought me to your home. You gave me your bed, and you didn't ask for anything in return." "I don't need anything in return." "Most people would." "I'm not most people." The words came out sharper than he intended, and for a moment the air between them felt charged, dangerous. She tilted her head, regarding him with something that might have been curiosity or might have been calculation. "No," she said finally, "I don't think you are." Lily moved closer to Ryan, wrapping her small hand around his. The woman noticed, and her expression shifted again, something almost wistful crossing her face. "How old are you, sweetheart?" she asked Lily. 7. "That's a good age. My daddy's the best daddy in the whole world." The woman's lips curved into a genuine smile. "I believe you." She looked back at Ryan, and the moment stretched between them, loaded with something neither of them could name. "I should go," she said finally. "Yes," Ryan agreed, though part of him wondered why that felt like the wrong answer. She reached into the pocket of her jacket, still draped over the chair, and pulled out a slim wallet. Ryan watched as she counted out bills, crisp and new, and placed them on the kitchen table. $200 bills. $2,000. "This should cover last night," she said. Ryan's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it for money." She raised an eyebrow. "Then consider it a laundry service. That shirt looks better on me than it probably did on you." The casual arrogance in her tone, the assumption that everything could be bought, that kindness was just another transaction, it hit something raw inside him. He stepped forward and pushed the money back across the table toward her. "Take it back." "Excuse me." "I said take it back. I don't want your money." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Everyone wants money, Mr. Holt." "Not everyone." He held her gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm not most men." For the first time since she walked into his kitchen, the woman looked genuinely thrown. She picked up the bills, slowly folding them back into her wallet, her movements deliberate. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You're right. I apologize." Ryan nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. "It's fine." "No, it's not." She closed the wallet and set it down. "I made an assumption. A wrong one. That was disrespectful." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. In his experience, people like her, people with money and power, they didn't apologize. They didn't admit when they were wrong. But here she was, standing in his kitchen, in his shirt, looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "I'm not used to people like you," she said, "people who help without expecting something in return." "Maybe you've been around the wrong people." "Maybe I have." The admission seemed to cost her something, and for a moment the mask slipped. He saw exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from carrying too much for too long. He saw loneliness. He saw something breakable beneath all that armor. Lily tugged on his hand. Daddy, can she stay for breakfast? Sweetheart, she has to go. But it's okay, Lily, the woman said, her voice gentle. Your dad's right, I have to go. She walked toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. She turned back, looking at Ryan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Ryan Holt, she said, testing his name on her tongue. I won't forget it. Good luck, Ryan said, and he mean it. She smiled, small and sad. Thank you for everything. And then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of her words. Ryan stood in the kitchen, staring at the closed door, feeling like something important had just walked out of his life. Lily looked up at him. She was nice. Yeah, Ryan said. She was. Are we going to see her again? Ryan picked up the coffee mug she had used and carried it to the sink. I don't think so, sweetheart. She lives in a different world than we do. Lily frowned. That's sad. Sometimes that's just how it is. But as he washed the mug, scrubbing away the lipstick stain on the rim, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not really. That evening, Ryan stood in the kitchen, making spaghetti. Lily at the table, coloring a picture of a dragon. The television was on in the background, the news droning on about traffic and weather and politics. He wasn't really paying attention until he heard the anchor's voice shift, taking on that urgent tone reserved for breaking stories. CEO Veronica Chase survives a terrifying car crash during last night's storm. The head of Chase Tech Industries was pulled from her vehicle moments before it exploded. Details are still emerging, but sources say a local man intervened, saving her life. Ryan turned the wooden spoon still in his hand and stared at the screen. There she was, the woman from his kitchen, Veronica Chase. She stood in front of a bank of microphones, flanked by security and assistants, looking polished and composed in a tailored suit. Her face was calm, professional, but there was something different about her eyes, something almost soft. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Chase, do you know the identity of the man who saved you? Veronica paused, and for a moment Ryan thought she might not answer. Then she leaned forward, her voice clear and steady. I do, and I can tell you this. He refused payment. Integrity. Like that, you can't buy. The camera flashed to footage of the crash site, the burned-out wreck being towed away, but Ryan couldn't look away from her face. Lily jumped up from the table, her eyes wide. Daddy, you saved a CEO. Ryan let out a long breath, half laughing, half bewildered. Well, that's my luck. Lily grabbed his arm, bouncing on her toes. That's so cool. Are you going to be on TV? I hope not, sweetheart. But even as he said it, he felt a strange unease settle over him. Veronica Chase wasn't just any CEO. She was one of the most powerful people in the city, maybe the country. Her company was worth billions. She had influence, connections, resources that Ryan couldn't even imagine. And now she knew his name. He told himself it didn't matter. She would go back to her world, and he would stay in his, and their paths would never cross again. The news segment continued, showing footage of Chase Tech Industries headquarters, stock prices, corporate achievements. The anchor mentioned that Veronica had built the company from nothing, that she was known for her fierce business acumen and her reluctance to show weakness. The woman on the screen seemed like a different person from the one who had stood in his kitchen that morning, vulnerable and almost human. Lily climbed into his lap. She was scared, wasn't she? When you saved her. Ryan wrapped his arms around his daughter. Yeah, she was. But you weren't scared. I was terrified. Lily turned to look at him, her small face serious. But you did it anyway. Yeah, that's what heroes do. Ryan kissed the top of her head. I'm not a hero, Lil. I just did what needed doing. On the television, Veronica was wrapping up her statement, thanking the emergency services, assuring everyone that she was fine. But just before she turned away from the cameras, she looked directly into the lens, and Ryan could have sworn she was looking right at him. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you again, V. He stared at the message, then at the television, then back at his phone. He didn't save the number. He didn't respond. He just put the phone face down on the counter and went back to making dinner, trying to convince himself that this was really the end of it. He was wrong. 3 days later, Ryan was at Lily's school, crouched under a sink in the staff bathroom, wrench in hand. The principal had called him that morning, desperate. The plumbing was backed up and the regular maintenance guy was out of town. Ryan said yes because he always said yes, and because the school had been good to Lily. He was tightening a pipe when he heard the commotion outside. Voices, lots of them, excited, confused. He wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped out into the hallway. Through the front doors, he could see a black luxury sedan parked at the curb, sleek and imposing, completely out of place in the school's modest parking lot. Parents and teachers had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. And then the door opened, and Veronica Chase stepped out. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back, her expression composed. She moved through the crowd like it wasn't there, her heels clicking against the pavement, and walked straight toward the school entrance, straight toward Ryan. He stood there frozen as she pushed through the doors and stopped in front of him. Up close, she was even more striking than he remembered, all sharp lines and quiet power. But there was something different now, something in the way she looked at him. "Mr. Holt," she said, "we need to talk." Ryan glanced around at the growing crowd of onlookers, then back at her. Here. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward him. The video was grainy shot from a traffic camera, but clear enough. It showed Ryan smashing the window, pulling her out, dragging her away from the car just before the explosion. It showed him falling to his knees, holding her, shielding her with his own body. Veronica's voice was quiet. "I had my people pull this footage. I wanted to see it for myself. What you did." Ryan stared at the screen, uncomfortable. "I did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "You didn't." She turned off the tablet and met his eyes. "I came here to apologize, properly. Not just for the money, for everything. For assuming, for being dismissive, for not seeing you clearly." Ryan didn't know what to say. Around them, the hallway had gone silent, every ear tuned to their conversation. Veronica glanced past him and saw Lily peeking out from a classroom doorway, her face curious and cautious. Veronica's expression softened immediately. She walked over, crouched down, and smiled. "You must be Lily." Lily nodded, clutching her backpack straps. "My dad talks about you." "He does. He said you were in trouble and he helped you." Veronica's smile widened, genuine and warm. "He did. Your dad's a hero." Lily beamed. "I know." Veronica stood and turned back to Ryan. "I want to do something for you, for your family." Ryan shook his head. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I looked into your situation, Mr. Holt. I know you're renting. I know the building has violations. I know the landlord has been threatening eviction." Ryan's stomach dropped. "How do you—" "I bought the building this morning." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Ryan stared at her, speechless. "Your rent is paid for the next 5 years. The repairs will be handled. You and Lily are secure." Ryan's hands clenched into fists, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of what she was saying. "Why?" Veronica met his gaze unflinching. "Because you saved my life, and because I can." She pressed a business card into his hand. "Call me when you're ready to talk. Really talk." And then she was gone, leaving Ryan standing in the middle of the hallway, the card burning in his palm, the whole school staring at him like he had just won the lottery. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ryan sat alone in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at the business card Veronica had pressed into his hand. It was simple, elegant, just her name and a phone number embossed in black. He turned it over in his fingers, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. 2 days later, she called. Her voice on the other end of the line was calm, businesslike, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something vulnerable. "I need to explain something to you," she said. "Okay." There was a long pause. "I wasn't always this person, Ryan. The CEO, the suits, the money. I grew up in foster care, 12 different homes before I turned 18. I learned early that the world doesn't give you anything. You have to take it. So I did." Ryan listened, saying nothing. "I built my company from nothing. I worked 80-hour weeks. I sacrificed relationships, health, sleep. I became someone people respected and feared. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be kind. I forgot what it felt like to help someone without expecting something in return." Her voice cracked just slightly. "That crash, it wasn't just an accident. It was a wake-up call. I've been so focused on winning that I stopped seeing people. I stopped seeing myself." Ryan finally spoke. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you reminded me of who I used to be, before I became this." She took a breath. I want to do something meaningful, something real. I'm starting a fund for single parents. People like you who are trying to hold it together but can't catch a break. I'm calling it the Holt Fund. Ryan's chest tightened. You don't need to. I do, and I need your help. My help. I want you to be part of it, not as a figurehead, as someone who actually understands what these people are going through. I want you to help me vet applicants, guide the program, make sure the money goes where it needs to go. No PR, no cameras, just real help. Ryan closed his eyes, overwhelmed. My way, your way. He could hear the smile in her voice. Deal, Mr. Holt. He exhaled slowly. Deal. There was a pause, comfortable and warm. Thank you, Ryan. For what? For giving me a reason to be better. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Veronica started showing up more, not with cameras or press releases, but quietly, genuinely. She came to the school for Lily's award ceremony, sitting in the back row, clapping louder than anyone when Lily received her certificate for perfect attendance. The other parents whispered phones out, trying to get pictures, but Veronica ignored them. Afterward, a reporter approached, shoving a microphone in her face. Ms. Chase, are you and Mr. Holt together? Veronica didn't miss a beat. Not yet, she said, her eyes finding Ryan's across the crowd. But he did lend me his favorite shirt. Ryan felt his face flush, but he couldn't stop the smile that tugged at his lips. Lily ran up to Veronica and threw her arms around her waist, the gesture so sudden and natural that it caught everyone off guard. Veronica froze for just a second, then her arms came up, wrapping around the little girl, her eyes closing. It was the most human Ryan had ever seen her look. When she opened her eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she whispered to Lily. For what? For sharing your dad with me. A month later, Veronica held a gala to launch the Holt Fund officially. It was a massive event held in a downtown hotel ballroom filled with donors and politicians and people who wrote checks with more zeros than Ryan had ever seen in his life. He felt out of place in his borrowed suit, standing at the edge of the crowd, but Veronica found him anyway. She wore a midnight blue gown, elegant and understated, and when she took his hand leading him toward the stage, he thought his heart might actually stop. Ladies and gentlemen, she said into the microphone, her voice steady and clear, I'd like to introduce you to someone. Ryan Holt is the reason this fund exists. Not because of what he did for me, though. I'll be grateful for that for the rest of my life. But because of who he is. Because he represents something we've lost in this world. Integrity. Kindness without conditions. Strength without arrogance. She turned to him, her eyes bright. Ryan, would you like to say a few words? He hadn't prepared anything, but he stepped up to the microphone anyway, his hands shaking. I'm not good at speeches, he started, and a few people laughed. But I know what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. I know what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. And I know what it's like to feel invisible. His voice grew stronger. This fund, it's not about charity. It's about dignity. It's about giving people a chance to stand on their own 2 feet. And I'm honored to be part of it. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet clapping, and Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Later that night, as the crowd thinned, Veronica handed him a small box. What's this? She smiled. Open it. Inside was a pen engraved with words that made his throat tighten. For the man who didn't sell his kindness. He looked up at her, and for the first time he saw past the CEO, past the armor, to the woman underneath. Thank you, he said, and he meant it for so much more than the pen. She squeezed his hand. Thank you, Ryan. Weeks turned into months, and the distance between them grew smaller. Veronica started spending more time at Ryan's house, sitting at the kitchen table, while Lily did homework, laughing at jokes that weren't even that funny. She learned to make spaghetti the way Lily liked it, with extra cheese and no mushrooms. She showed up to Lily's soccer games, cheering from the sidelines, her designer heels sinking into the muddy grass. People talked, of course. The tabloids ran stories speculating, analyzing, dissecting every interaction. But Veronica didn't care, and Ryan learned not to care either. One evening after Lily had gone to bed, Veronica and Ryan sat on the porch, the night air cool and calm. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I never thought I'd have this, she said quietly. Have what? A family. Ryan kissed the top of her head. You do now. The envelope appeared on Ryan's kitchen counter one morning, plain and white, with his name written in Veronica's handwriting. He opened it slowly, his heart pounding. Inside was a single card. It said, "Will you marry me?" Ryan stared at it for a long moment, then started laughing, the sound filling the small kitchen. Lily came running in alarmed. "What's wrong, Daddy?" He showed her the card. "Veronica asked me to marry her." Lily's face lit up like the sun. "Is she going to be my mom?" Ryan knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "Yes, sweetheart, if you want her to be." Lily squeezed him tight. "I do. I really, really do." Ryan called Veronica that afternoon. "Yes," he said when she answered. There was a pause. "Yes, well, yes, I'll marry you." He could hear her breath catch. "No, really? I was terrified you'd say no. I was terrified you'd change your mind." They both laughed, the sound nervous and joyful at once. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of their house, decorated with string lights and wildflowers. There were no photographers, no press, just the people they loved. Veronica wore a simple white dress, her hair loose, her smile radiant. Ryan wore the same suit he'd worn to the gala, but this time he didn't feel out of place. He felt exactly where he belonged. Lily stood between them, holding both their hands, her face glowing with joy. When the officiant asked if they were ready, they both said yes, their voices strong and sure. Veronica turned to Ryan, her eyes shining. "Sometimes kindness saves a life." Ryan smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "Sometimes it saves two." Lily looked up, her voice clear and bright. "Sometimes three." They pulled her into a hug, the three of them wrapped together as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was a small moment, quiet and unremarkable to anyone watching. But to them, it was everything. Happiness, it turned out, didn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrived softly, born from a single act of decency on a stormy night, and it stayed because they chose every day to hold on to each other. Ryan thought back to that morning when he woke up to find Veronica in his kitchen, wearing his shirt, looking at him like she saw something in him that he didn't even see in himself. He thought about the crash, the explosion, the rain. He thought about how close he had come to driving past, to minding his own business, to letting someone else handle it. And he thought about how one choice, one moment of deciding to be the person he wanted to be, instead of the person life had tried to make him, had changed everything. Veronica whispered against his shoulder, "Thank you for saving me." Ryan held her closer, Lily between them, their little family complete. "Thank you for saving me back." That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.